and here we're going to go ahead and do a video on the etymology of the name Jesus. How does it evolve and how does it move through the translations in the different languages down to how we get the name Jesus. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in. The very first one you're looking at is the most oldest form that they had been using for a very long time before Jesus, but this is also his name. This is Yehoshua, and in Hebrew it reads right to left. So the letters are Yod, He, Vav, Shin, Ayin, and you have the vowel dots in there. And in Hebrew, everybody's name has a meaning, and it's a combination of words. And this particular one is broken up into Yehovah, which is God's name, and Yoshia, which means saves. So his name means God saves. This also is the name of Joshua. This is how we get Joshua in Hebrew. And this is the long form version. Now, in the time of Jesus, they actually were not using the long form version. We have writings to show what they were using. But that brings us on to our next one. So this is the main one that they were using in the time of Jesus. This is his name in Hebrew. This is just a shortened version. It still means Yehovah saves. It still means God saves. And this is Yeshua. And you can see the vowels and the letters. It's Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin. And that was the one that he was walking around using the most. We have writings proving all that. But they were even using a shorter version of this. So let's go ahead to that one. So this is Yeshu, which is the even shorter one of Yod, Shin, Vav. And you have the letters mixed in, or the vowels mixed in. And let's go ahead and jump into the next language one. So there's a lot of scholarly debate over how things were written down and what was mixed in, but there's some good evidence to support that the Gospels were originally written in Hebrew, and then it was translated into Aramaic, and then the Greeks come along and they take a look at the Hebrew and they're like, yeah, I don't want to learn that. I'd rather just learn the Aramaic because that's what we're comfortable with. And so they translated the Greek from the Aramaic. Not entirely sure if that's the case, but there is some good points to be made and some of the textual things to support that. But let's get into the name. So this is the Aramaic, and there is two different pronunciations of it. There's the Western Syriac pronunciation, which is Ishu, and there is a Eastern Syriac pronunciation, which is Isho. Now, why is that important? They just had a combination of two different sounds from depending on where you lived. But let's go ahead and move into the next one. And this is where things start to get a little different. Now, this is the Greek. And in the Greek, they were trying to transliterate the same sounds that the people were using to refer to the Messiah, instead of, just translating it into their languages. They were trying to copy the same noises, but they could not, because in Greek, they did not have a sh sound. So in place of the sh, they put an s. So what you would have seen was Yesu, and this little s at the end, you can see on both of them, the S at the end, they included that because they needed to make it masculine. Because they can't have a feminine name to the Messiah. So it effectively ended up being Jesus, and that is how the Greek writes theirs. Now let's go ahead and move on. And I'm throwing this one in. This is the Latin. There's not much change. Jesus. The V is actually a U sound. Jesus. And let's go ahead and move into the King James, or King James. Actually, the J wasn't invented until much later. The J was invented in Italy in 1524. The English didn't pick it up until 1633. So if you pull up the original King James 1611, you will see Jesus, and you will not see any J's. So we don't have the J yet. So let's go ahead and move down to the King James, the later King James. And so the later King James has now incorporated the letter J. The J sound is not natural. It originally was a Y or I. And that's how we get Jesus. Now, there is a lot of people out there that are saying all these different things. There's a lot of confusion on his name. And one of the things that's being said out there is something called from Alexander Hislop. Alexander Hislop was kind of a crazy man, and he made a lot of strange connections, like connecting the dots everywhere. And he made one comment about the name Jesus. He said that it was connected to Hail Zeus. Jesus, Hail Zeus. It's just a very similar sounding thing when you say that in English, but if you actually break it down and get into the Greek, you don't see that. It doesn't exist. There's only one thing that matches that, and I'll point that out. So let's go ahead and look at that. So this is Hail Zeus in the Greek, and as you can see, there is S at the end of Zeus, and that really is the only thing that shares commonality to Jesus, the name Jesus. And I've already explained that that S was added to the end. Let's go back up to the Greek. That S was added to the end of the name to make it masculine. So that S shouldn't even be there. So there is no commonality with Jesus, meaning Hail Zeus. And I know some people, it's not a problem. They don't even know about this issue. But there are people out there that will say that and try to say, don't use the name Jesus. And that's not linguistically correct. That is something made up by a guy who was a little bit crazy. But anyways, so that is the evolution or etymology of the name Jesus. There is nothing wrong with using Jesus. There's nothing wrong with using Yehoshua. There's nothing wrong with using Yeshua, Yeshu, all of these. It's still correct. It is how it evolved through the languages. So if you're using one over the other, you're just using something of a different language, and that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you call on him with using any of these names, I guarantee you he is listening. There is not a person out there that you use one of these names and he's going to ignore you. This still is his name. It's just, to me personally, I like the Hebrew because it's closer in my mind back to the original meaning of Yehovah saves. But all of these also mean Yehovah saves, God saves. You know, that is what he did. That is how his name breaks down. So there you have it. That's the evolution of his name. And I hope this has been a blessing to you. And thank you for joining us. Project Truth Beam, let light shine on truth. Thank you.